Good day, everyone, and welcome to Different Stages Radio. I'm your host, JJ, broadcasting in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And my guest today, you know him from fronting such metal pioneers as Armored Saint and Anthrax. He will also be doing 3 special shows this December as part of celebrating the Songs of Anthrax 1993 to 2003 with Category 7. Please welcome my guest, John Bush.
What's
How
up,
are
JJ?
you?
How are you, buddy? How's Vancouver today?
Vancouver is quite stellar. There's that heat wave coming up our way. I think it was like 99 in Portland yesterday,
Wow.
but fortunately not as cooking for us up here, but still very pleasant. So in Fahrenheit, I guess we're looking at 80 something, which for us is nice and toasty. But if the further
That's pretty hot.
because we're on the coast, so you get that nice
You get the
breeze off the
breeze.
water. Yeah, but otherwise
Yeah, we
it's pretty cooking.
our same played a show in Vancouver a few months back there with Wasp. We did a tour and that was great. And that was the first time we had played there since like 1985, which is crazy because we did the tour with Metallica, 1985, Ride the Lightning, March of the Saint tour, and then which Wasp was originally on for most of it, except for on the West Coast. And then we didn't go back to Vancouver until we played there last year in 2024, which is absurd and ridiculous that we hadn't. But the show was amazing, and it was great to play Vancouver again. So
Totally.
exciting.
Yeah, and that's why there's a group of us who will definitely go down and see it in Seattle because there were some of those Armored Saints in between you coming on.
Yeah,
And of course, those Anthrax shows too in the late '90s were great as well.
yeah, they were great. The Commodore is a great venue, and yeah, I remember having awesome shows with Anthrax there as well.
So we're at this big idea of doing these 3 shows coming up and looking back at the era that is John Bush, which for me is I find more the definitive era. I know probably most people will definitely say the most the OG Belladonna era is probably considered the most classic era of the band.
Of course, yeah.
However, I find on my end when you were a part of the band that it felt like more of a cohesive unit. And those 4 albums I find are so consistent and so brilliant. I'd like to get your thoughts on that run that you did.
Well, that's very kind of you. It was a new decade, so it was a new decade, and um, it's funny. I make the joke that Elektra Records signed Motley Crue and Anthrax almost around the same time and gave them these big deals. And then both those bands let go of their lead singers, which was Elektra was probably like going, what are these guys doing? But hey, personal things go on and sometimes bands want to make change. And I just happen to be part of that movement of change. But I embraced it when I joined the band. I was really stoked and I knew we had some really killer material with eventually became Sound of White Noise, and I thought we were doing something really inventive, and it felt very forward thinking in this new decade, which was the 90s. Taking nothing away from the 80s. It was amazing. And Anthrax was just, at the top of their game, but it was a new time and it was a lot of great music coming out from the, Pacific Northwest, of course, and all over the place. So it was a time to kind of restart, and that's how we were thinking. So I think Sound of White Noise is an amazing record, and maybe even a little underrated if that's fair to say. And that was our biggest record with me. So things got a little shady after that with some record company distractions and a few other things. But I really think that the follow-up records were great too. They just maybe didn't get quite the accolades that Sound of White Noise did.
I agree because for me, Stomp, if I was to single one out, that's the one for me. But I look back at Sound of White Noise as well. I was working in a record store at the time, and Elektra that you speak of were pushing it quite hard, which I thought was awesome.
It
However,
was.
however, at the same time, I thought the way they were talking about it, which okay, that's cool, but perhaps maybe just a bit unfair that they seemed to pimp it as this is going to be as big as the Black album at the time. And I'm like, well, that's
Oh,
that's cool, but at the same time, that's a lot of pressure and perhaps maybe a little unfair. So
was anything as big as the Black record? I mean,
so
come
there
on.
you go.
Maybe,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
We
Back in Black.
yeah, there we go. And we didn't
Appetite for Destruction.
yeah,
So,
and we didn't really know that at the time, but I appreciated what they were saying about the album, but it seemed almost more like I was getting this tone of it had to do as good. Not it's not it's and it just seemed like, whoa, hey, I'm not sure
well,
about that.
because there was a lot of money invested. That's why, it comes down to that really. So, I mean, in retrospect, there was probably a couple decisions that were maybe not the right ones, like putting Black Lodge as the second song. We kind of resisted that strongly, and then they still went with it. And then the video itself, even though I totally think it's inventive and creative and weird, it probably wasn't the right video because it didn't even showcase the band at all. So, we probably would have done better if we would have done like Room for One More Second, and then by the third video, you kind of go on a right turn. But whatever. I've had many of those moments in my career with Anthrax and Armored Saint that you would look back and go, well, that was probably not a good decision. But you live with it, and life moves on. And, the record as a whole is a solid, amazing record. So, and, like I said, I think the follow-ups too are great. They just maybe didn't get quite the attention. We've kind of resurged a little bit with We've Come For You All because we signed to Nuclear Blast in Europe and they have a great presence and did an awesome job there. And it kind of filtered back to the States. But, you know, this isn't about trying to right the wrongs at all. This is more about me going, hey, there's some really cool material throughout here, and I'd like to sing it and play it because it's kind of, for the most part, been in like limbo. So, and I get it. I mean, I'm not bitter or frustrated by that. Well, maybe a tiny bit of frustration, but like, I mean, I'm proud of this music, and if I don't do it eventually, it's just going to kind of fall into a hole of nothingness, and that'll suck.
And like you've said, the fans have been asking for it, and the fans will constantly bring it up to you and say how important those albums are, I included. And I look at Stomp, to go back to that. That'll be 30, celebrating its 30th anniversary this fall,
I
which is
know.
our. And I look back, that's another one where I remember setting up a midnight sale because it was the same night, which you probably know, same day of release as Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis album.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's an Anthrax album coming out as well. Let's incorporate it and have this as a bigger thing. It's going to draw the same people. And I'm thinking the Anthrax always solid, but I'm like, no, this destroyed the Osmosis album. And I'm like, no, that's the record. And to think that that's 30 years ago and how strong that
Yeah.
album is and still holds up front to back. Any
Yeah, I mean
memories from that run?
that's terrifying for me because because I know I'm 30 years older, but hey, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's also a really solid album, and we made some really cool videos with that, especially the Fueled video is great. And it is, like I said, I believe in a lot of that music, and it'll be fun to sing it live. And a lot of a lot of people, as they do when people get of age and they discover music, a lot of people did that in the 90s, and so that happens to be the time when we were making these records. So, and then it always stays with you, and whatever you kind of, I mean, I remember Kiss Alive and Zeppelin 2 were the records I bought, and forever those will still be some of my favorite albums. So, it's when you connect with music, it's a very important time for all of us. And a lot of people was the 90s. So, that's the correlation there. So obviously a lot of them was the 80s as well. So, we're just gonna have some fun. The primary objective is to really enjoy this and celebrate these songs and the music and give some, it's a little nostalgic because it is, and that's always fun.
And with these four albums, it seems you've alluded a little bit without giving anything away to maybe going a bit deep on some albums.
Well, I want to, I'm trying to be fair to the guys who are playing with me because I've hit them with a lot of songs and they're like, dude, and I gotta learn them too. I mean, some of the stuff's in the back of my memory there, and it was weird because I've been singing to them and they come back to me, and they come back to the lyrics. I don't even have to look sometimes, but I still am learning things, and I totally understand that they have to as well. So, but we got 4 months, it's plenty of time. And I don't want it to just be this is the show, this is the show for all three. I'd like to change it up a little bit. So keep people on their toes a little bit. So, there's the obvious choices of songs, but I'd like to dig a little deeper to pull some ones out that people will go like, wow, he's playing that song. That's cool.
I think that's a very wise idea. Now, talk about you got have an amazing band, the Category 7 band, but we don't have Jack, we have Joey, which I'm sure is a major hardship because you guys clearly don't get along. You and Joey.
Right, exactly.
So fill people in that no, and maybe pun intended, fill people in on who's in your The band.
Well, it's Phil Demmel, as you kind of alluded to, Mike Orlando, the two guitar players, Jason Bittner, is an amazing drummer, and then Joey Vera, because Jack, unfortunately, he has something else going on. I can't really divulge what that is, but when it comes out, it'll be like, oh, we get it. But Jack's amazing and solid guy and is a great person, and it'll be a bummer not to have him there, but that's sometimes the way it goes. But we're it's the first three shows that we're doing this, and we'll kind of evaluate things a little later as to how this proceeds and when it proceeds, and I don't know yet. Right now I'm just kind of focused on these three shows. So, but yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. And I think, of course, having Vera there is, I mean, he's amazing. And we just finished writing an Armored Saint record that's just about done. And it's going to be great. Comes out like March, April next year. And it's going to be another solid killer Armored Saint record.
As always, I was about to ask because Punching the Sky was just ripping, and we got 5 years since then. So that's awesome to hear. Do we have a working title for the new album?
We do. I'm not really quite ready to reveal it quite yet, but it'll come out soon enough. We're just about done with the record, and like I said, it's really cool. It's a little different, which I think. Still some, heavy tunes on it, but we kind of veer a little bit, here and there. And Armored Saints been a band that's through the years we don't really kind of rest on what people think we should do. It's always going to be rooted in hard rock, heavy metal, and that's just what we do. And we're not trying to throw people, our coffee house, hip hop record. I mean, we're going to stay true to our origins. But I think that we can always branch out and willing to try different arrangements and different instruments and trying to incorporate maybe different vocals. And the songwriting itself is just constantly evolving. So I'm really proud of this. And, by the time it comes out, it'll be 6 years because it came out in Punch in the Sky was 2020. And, we had COVID that kind of messed things up a little bit too, but it's a long time. We were due for a record, understatement.
No, because you're pretty consistent there for a bit with Win Hands Down and through Punching the Sky. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
so good. Now, can you speak a bit more though for about Category 7? Maybe some people have been living under a rock, and that record that came out last summer is quite solid in its own right.
Yeah, it's a great record. I'm real proud of it. And, it kind of happened organically. I hate using that term, but it was true. Those guys said, Phil and Mike contacted me and said, hey, would you be into doing this? And I said, well, send me music. I got to hear it. And what I heard, I was like, whoa, these are some really badass riffs and sounds very powerful. So I said, let me try to work with it. Let me try to write and see what I come up with and see if it's cohesive and it blends with what you're doing. And we wrote a couple songs and everyone was like, wow, this is great. So then we wrote a couple more and then we wrote a couple more and then we had enough for a full record. So it's like, let's make a record. So I think it's a great album. It's still kind of like a new band, even though all these guys obviously are veterans of the heavy metal world, but still new group. And I always keep my expectations low on everything because that's just my approach. The music business has taught me that. So, um, I think the record's great, and if we can like piggyback it a little bit with this idea of this celebrating the Anthrax tunes, it might make sense and work. And if I was building a band together from scratch, I would certainly for those guys because they're incredible musicians. So this is not a far reach. It's going to be a lot of work to play two sets, although the C7 set will be a shorter one, of course. But it's three shows. We can pull it off and have a lot of fun with it. And maybe it'll open the door for the C7 record because it is a great album.
Nice. Now, are you considering maybe recording any of these shows for a possible release or?
I haven't thought about that yet. Somebody also asked me that. I haven't really thought about that. I'm working on a couple other things, but I mean, I don't know. Somebody says you could put out a DVD, and I was like, DVD? Who
Yeah,
buys DVDs?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
But something that might bleed perhaps into more shows depending on how these three do, or you think it's just a kind of a
Yeah,
feeling thing?
I think I want to keep it special and keep it
Yeah,
as a situation where it's like. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew, and I want it to be something that's like, oh, he's doing that. Okay, oh, he's doing that. Will I do more? Probably, but I mean, I don't see myself doing, some kind of like 60-day tour. No way. I don't want to do that. I wanted to keep it special and keep people enthusiastic, and Obviously there's a big world out there, and when I did those albums, every record we toured Europe and we toured South America and went to Japan. So, I'm hoping there's other options, of course, but again, I want it to be special. I'm not looking to like go milk this thing and get the most out of it. That's not the approach at all. It's really about just honoring these albums and playing these songs for some fans and keeping it, like I said, keeping it special.
That's no, that's deeply admirable. Now the dates are December 13th, LA, December 18th, St. Charles, Illinois, and then December 20th in New York City. Tickets are on sale now, correct, I believe?
Yeah, yeah, they've been on sale for about 10 days, doing pretty well too.
That's awesome. And might there be room if any sell out? We don't want to go there yet. We want these shows to sell out, and maybe an additional date might be added to each city. Maybe we'll
I
see.
don't think, no, I don't think
Oh,
so. I
no.
think this is
Okay.
it. It's where we have to travel, and we're going from LA to New York in a week. So it's going to be a lot in December. Hopefully the weather's cooperating as well. So there's that factor, and it's right before Christmas. So I had a little apprehension of doing that, but I spoke to my agent and he was like going, the promoters are into it. So I said, okay, let's do it. Because December is kind of a rough month. People stop touring as the month kind of gets going, and people are occupied with Christmas and the holidays and stuff. So they're spending money on those things, and that's completely understandable. But I think we went in for the right venues, and we're trying to do it in the proper way. So I think it's going to be good.
Awesome. And have you had any feedback from the Anthrax guys about the run? Have you
I
heard?
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken to everyone but Charlie so far. I spoke to Scott, and I mean through te actually I saw Frank Bello. We hung out a bit the other night, and then I've texted Scott, and I'm going to reach out to Charlie too. I just really wanted it to be like I wanted to do this for myself. It was really important for me personally to say, okay, I'm going to do this because I am doing it. Obviously, it's not them, um and I didn't want it to feel like, hey, you know, are you cool with this? And can I rely on you? And I didn't want it to be like that because I'm not doing that. I'm doing it for myself. And it's a big step for me. I was kind of overcoming a little bit of fear with it. And I've talked about it for a while, so everybody knew that I was talking about it, but finally said, let's do it. And so I didn't want it to be like, I wanted to make sure that they were okay and also that they were felt compelled to have to help in some way because that's not my mentality. Now, of course, if they want to play a song or two, whatever, of course, I welcome that. But it's not about that. It's more about me doing this and really, taking the cheese and going for it.
That's great because I always felt that you guys still had a great relationship after you had exited the band. So I thought you'd still be chums and keep in touch, and that's cool to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a little period of time where we kind of fell out of graces a little bit, but we fixed that. And again, I have nothing but the utmost respect for those guys. I mean, they made that music, so it's really important. They're a big part of it, obviously. That's an understatement. Charlie wrote a lot of those songs, Scott wrote a lot of those lyrics. Frankie was a big part of coming up with vocal melodies. So those guys are all a big part of all this. And I want the songs to sound killer, and I want them to be supportive in any way they want to be. So
Well, and that's so true. And I wanted to mention before we go that I also find that your era of Anthrax, I would almost equate it in some ways to the Dio era of Sabbath. That most people still might go back to the Ozzy, which is definitely the most classic, the most iconic,
of
no
course.
question. But there's still that core base, the Dio Sabbath, or let's even say even the Tony Martin Sabbath to an extent, or even
Well,
the Sammy Hagar Van Halen.
yeah.
There's that you made that impact, and it's a special part of the band that should never be neglected or overlooked.
Well, Ronnie and Sammy are, has pretty high accolades. I don't know if I quite get there, but that's very nice of you. Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules are two of my favorite Sabbath records of all time, and so it's again, and I mean, hey, the Ozzy's Sabbath records are legendary, and that's when I basically discovered music. So I mean, I love all that stuff, but it's bands they morph, and if you're around for a long time you're probably going to go through changes, and it just happens. It's hard when vocals change. I feel the same way, when Brian Johnson came in, I was like, I mean, you had to replace Bon, he died, but it was hard to make that adjustment right away, even though there's a similarity in their style for sure. But Ronnie is very different from Ozzy, so there was an adjustment there. But as time goes on, you try to give it a benefit of the doubt, and if you're a fan of the band, I mean, you know, Heaven and Hell was Geezer, Tony, and Bill, so it was it was still Sabbath, and Ronnie is just amazing. But Ronnie also had to replace. Technically, he didn't, but he had to replace Ian Gillan and David Coverdale in a way by joining Blackmore. But he's Ronnie and he can do that and he's phenomenal. Um, I use those people as inspiration and I use Ozzy and I love Roth stuff with Van Halen. I saw Van Halen in Long Beach Arena in 1978. So, it's like all this is just music and I just want it to be something as long as there's quality of the music. People are going to have their favorites. I always say you can like both. You don't have to dislike one because you like the other. You could like one a little more, and I get it, but you can still like both. You can, and especially in the media world and then the internet world, everyone's on their computers like, oh, this is better. Why I like his era better. It's like, well, you can like both, but it's funny. It's a competitive world. I get it.
Well, everybody should really look forward to these three shows this coming December because they're going to bring in severe intensity and integrity. And this could be the one chance that you get to see these songs done properly with an amazing band as well. And by all means, make sure you're there early to see the Category 7 set because I'm sure that's going to kill. And we look forward to the new Armored Saint record coming out in the spring. We will wait for a title. Maybe we'll speak to John next year when that record's out.
Well, we have another reason to chat.
There you go.
There
Well, I
you
appreciate
go.
John's time. This is Different Stages Radio.
Thank you.